Da-na-na. Oh, I was early. Oh. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Nerdist Book Club. My name is Maude Garrett. We are back at this, one of the best online book clubs you'll ever put your eyes to. Joining me is my co-host, Hector Navarro. And we are getting our high fantasy on, covering the book The Wheel of Time by Robert Jordan. I really should have had my copy out. How does yours look? Let's see who's got the most broken and battered copy.
I think I got you beat.
Yeah, well, I got a little tear on this little part here.
I have had pieces falling off, so I think I got you beat. But it's not my copy, it's Keller's copy.
Oh, got it. This is my second time reading the book. Hector, it's your first time. We have very differing opinions, so it's going to be a lot of fun. A big shout out to everyone in the chat who is joining us. Not only are we on Nerdist's YouTube page, we're also on Geek and Sundry's Twitch, and we're on Nerdist's Facebook page. If you're new, say a big hello. We would love to not only hear from you, but hear what kind of books you're interested in, what your favorite genre is, and what you are currently reading that's not The Wheel of Time as well. Now, Hector, it's very apparent that actually I should really recognize the fact that Rachel's unwell today. She got her booster shot, which is fantastic. I've got to get mine as well. It's just knocked her around a little bit. And so we're going to take the wheel.
Okay, Maude. I do want to say when non-Americans say unwell, I feel like that sounds more serious than it is. So I think a better phrase might be like under the weather seems less serious, which is Rachel's just
under the well.
No, even worse. That's even worse. She's fine, but just, when you get your booster shot, it knocks you out for a day or two. So she's just dealing with that.
Under the weather.
Also, we gotta acknowledge the glass of wine I got going today.
So full. Is that a whole bottle?
What's that?
Is that a whole bottle? Would you say?
No, it's not. I mean, Maude, you guys know you came over last night. It's only a piece of this bottle right here. So it's only a little bit.
So the wonderful social media manager, Lee, who's going to pop in and say hi to everyone in the chat, found at Trader Joe's a giant bottle of Pinot Grigio, which could double up as a glass guitar.
The Wheel of Time. That's what the music sounds like.
A tribute. Love that. I've got to say it because I'm Aussie. Kyle Harrison says, "G'day, mate," from Australia. From Adelaide, sorry. Adelaide. Ooh. So, yeah, super great to see new people in the chat. I also dropped by the Wheel of Time Discord and had a chat and did like a preliminary test of some of the discussion points. And let me just say, it is so fantastic over there. So if anyone's joining me from a link that I promoted in there, a big hi to you as well. So Hector, your first time reading this book, my second time. You've made it very, very clear to us that young adult is not your genre and that maybe very prosy / long-winded high fantasy might not necessarily be your jam either.
Yeah, but at the same time, I really love The Hobbit, but I think everybody who's a high fantasy fan is kind of like, well, yeah, of course you do. Everybody loves The Hobbit. That doesn't mean that you like high fantasy. So I've accepted that. It's not usually my favorite genre, but I do love Middle Earth and Lord of the Rings, and I can get into that stuff. I just think that I struggle with a specific or like a certain writing style that we can talk about. And I am real bummed to say I did not love this book as much as I hoped that I did.
Okay. Did you like it more than another fantasy series that we poured 6 weeks into, named Wind by Patrick Rothfuss?
It's tough because Patrick Rothfuss is a really great writer. And the thing that I struggled with that book was like, I didn't like the main character's attitude. And that's a me problem. That's not a, you know what I mean? And I remember we were discussing that book and I was like, I just don't like a story being told by a person who's like, I'm really good at everything. So let me tell you how I'm really good at everything. Even if it's an unreliable narrator thing. And then I go, okay, well then what are the rules? It's just tough for me to grab onto those stakes. So I think that I probably prefer this writing style more. Having said that, I for Name of the Wind, for not Name of the Wind, for the Wheel of Time. Having said that, I think I might prefer Name of the Wind because The Eye of the World, this first book, it was oh, was there a good? I love being high while watching fantasy. Yeah, I mean,
High
you know,
fantasy.
it
Yep.
could help. It could help. So I think that Name of the Wind felt a little bit more contemporary to me, even though they're both, you know, even though Wheel of Time, this first book was a like late 80s, early 90s thing. I just feel like Name of the Wind felt a little bit more modern. So
Yeah,
I don't know. I guess I did like Name of the Wind more than this one, Maude. That's interesting. But I did like both of those more than Assassin's Apprentice, which we read years
Oh
ago.
yeah.
Right? That was a tough one.
That was a bit of a slog, yeah.
But you know, there's lots of things about fantasy that I adore, and I think I can talk about some of the reasons why I couldn't connect to it. But what were your overall thoughts? This is the second time you've read this?
So the first time I read it, the book ended up looking like this, pulled apart. Those inquiring about if you read the book, ebook, or audiobook, a huge game changer for me this time around was Rosamund Pike, who plays Moraine in the Amazon Prime series that's just come out in the last few sort of weeks, if not months.
Love her.
Rosamund Pike is narrating this latest sort of edition of the audiobook, and she is fantastic. And it was so wonderful because she does the best Moraine impersonation I've ever heard. But she does such a good job. She really understands the characters, the nuance, the story, the lore, the intensity. Listening to it was fantastic. I'm not sure I picked up too much more that I didn't catch the first time, only because it had been sort of 2.5 years. And I consume so much that it's like a sieve. As soon as one's done, I'm kind of on to the next and have to relearn and re-remember everything. This is, you know, one of about 16 books, I believe, in this series. So if you start this, it's a big challenge. Unless you're Aaron right there, who's gone through their 5th or 6th reread. That's amazing.
How? I realize that when I ask that question, I'm the person who I'm like, I've seen almost every episode of Star Trek. I can commit to stuff. But that just blows my mind, Maude. That just blows my mind. 16 books, 5th or 6th reread. I hear that and I go, so this is like your hobby. Like this is it. Like it's just this.
Thanks to those in the comments that are correcting me. 15 books, 14 and one prequel.
14 and a prequel. Okay. Oh, well then in that case, that's manageable. Then I can do that easy.
Yeah. 16 too far. 14 and a prequel. We got it going. I think a big thing is overall thoughts. We usually like to start there. We like to rate it out of 5 or 10 or whatever sort of rating system that you have. Did you like it? Did you not? You know, what kind of experience did you have with it? Were you show first and then book? There's a lot to kind of like go through with that. But yeah, we'll start with 1 to 5 stars. How many would you give The Eye of the World, the first book in Wheel of Time?
I give it 1 star.
1
star, because my rating systems, I keep track of what I read on Goodreads, and it is for me and it is for my reference. It's not something that I'm like, oh, I am a book reviewer and I believe this work of art is worthy of this. No, this is just a Hector reference, meaning if years from now I forget reading this book and I look up my Goodreads and I'm like, oh, should I try that Eye of the World, that Wheel of Time? I think I watched this show. Let me give that a shot. I can see that star and go, no, you did not have a good time. Maybe you can invest in something else. And then also to answer your other question, Maude, how did I experience the book? I did it, I think, in the best way possible, which is watch the first episode of the show, watched it with my girlfriend, enjoyed the first episode, paused, read the book up to that point, and it was like 113 pages. Kind of tough. Sure. And then went back and watched episode 2, and then again got back to the book and read episode 2 as much as that sort of adaptation, you know, fit, and bounced back and forth until I think they're at like episode 5, maybe 5 or 6, and at this point I finished the book because it's past where they are currently in the season. So that's how I did it. And somebody in the chat earlier said that they were glad they did too, because it helped them to visualize a lot of and I agree, a lot of the characters sounded like the characters in the show for me, Rosamund Pike especially. the great actor that plays Lan, her warder.
Daniel Henney.
Just an amazing cast in that show that I think like actually enhanced my interpretation of the material. So that's how I did it. How many stars would you give? And were you watching the show before, after, at the same time?
Well, I read the book 2019 the first time.
That's right. That's right.
But in this one, I actually only finished listening to the book. You could dive in. You could literally fit your whole self in there and go under it. I was able to listen throughout the book. I was watching the show. I was able to see the first 3 episodes of the show before it came out so that I could interview the cast for Nerdist. Lee, we can link maybe some of the...
Check those out on Nerdist YouTube. Check them out.
I learn a lot from the characters and from their kind of like understanding of the characters whilst watching this show. And then it helped me during my second listen, the depth of it, which I really appreciated. Namely, just how dedicated Rosamund Pike is, the relationship she has in real life with Daniel Henney and their commitment to the characters, how super green all the kids of Emmons Field are, and how much they're... I think the commitment that they all have, like they're ready to do this for the next 15 seasons if need be.
I love it.
Cool. Yeah.
More power to him.
So let's learn a little bit about Robert Jordan. He has passed. So he passed with before finishing the series, and fantasy author Brandon Sanderson, working with Robert Jordan's widow, was able to kind of finish and complete the last 2 or 3 books, I believe, so that it has seen its whole iteration. Brandon Sanderson's an amazing author. He does Mistborn. He does Way of the Kings, a bunch of different books. He cannot do no wrong, basically. So he was a good person to pick up from it. But a little bit about Robert Jordan, Hector, if you please.
Yeah, Robert Jordan, born 1948, passed away in 2007, is best known for his internationally best-selling epic fantasy series, The Wheel of Time, copyright, which has sold over 40 million copies in North America and is currently being adapted for the screen. A native of Charleston, Jordan graduated from the Citadel, the military college of South Carolina, with a degree in physics. He served 2 tours in Vietnam with the U.S. Army and received multiple decorations for his service. And I think I was remembering some fans or somebody telling me like he was working on this book in the early 80s, and it took like 6 to something years before he was like at a point where this first one was ready to go. And I mean, he passed away in 2007 and the series wasn't finished. So that's a long running, fantasy series. And the first book here, Wheel of Time, The Eye of the World. Here's the synopsis. The Wheel of Time turns and ages come and pass, leaving memories that become legend. Legend fades to myth, and even myth is long forgotten when the age that gave it birth returns again. What was, what will be, and what is may yet fall under the shadow. Moraine Damodred arrives in Emmons Field on a quest to find the one prophesied to stand against the Dark One, a malicious entity sowing the seeds of chaos and destruction. When a vicious band of half-men, half-beasts called Trollocs invade the village seeking their master's enemy, Moraine persuades Rand al'Thor and his friends to leave their home and enter a larger, unimaginable world filled with dangers awaiting in the shadows and in the light. I just want to say, I know that I have an American accent, and no American accent should ever read the synopsis to a fantasy realm. It just sucks the magic right out of it. I apologize, but it's just me and Maude tonight, and I'm helping Maude out as much as possible.
I'll do my Moraine impersonation. The last sentence.
Thank you.
Moraine persuades Rand al'Thor and his friends to leave their home and enter a larger, unimaginable world filled with dangers, waiting in the shadows and in the light. Rosamund Pike's got such a great depth, like deep voice, and she does
Amazing.
a Loyal, and it's all the way down here. It's great.
Ooh,
it's really well done.
Great.
So the breakdown of the book is in 4 parts. You basically have in Emmons Field, where we meet our main protagonists that are all seemingly in a very, very small, quaint town. This part sort of Two Rivers has been somewhat ostracized, a little bit removed from the major cities and establishments for about 1,000 years. So they're very much self-contained, which means that news doesn't travel super far. They have peddlers that will come in maybe once or twice a year, sometimes with information.
Gandalf.
It's a very self-sustainable little village where everyone knows each other.
Hobbiton.
It's a little bit like that. And it's interesting that there's a few formulaic things here where a wisdom, someone who has all the information, who's a little bit older and wiser, who knows a lot about not only the land, but a prophecy comes in and they're like, okay, no matter what, you're in on this and you've got to leave everything that you know so that you can join the adventure. And that's kind of what happens, but there's a more imminent threat with the Trollocs that overrun the small town looking for someone. We've got our main sort of like Emmond Fielders, 3 guys, 2 girls. I remember when I first read it, I was really struggling with the differentiating factors between all of them. I didn't think they had enough of a personality, and the show really helped me with that differentiation more so.
Yes, I agree.
But how do you find sort of like your 19-year-old Rand being sort of like the center character in all of this adventure, because you didn't like Kvothe because he was a know-it-all show-off.
Little sure of himself. That's right. But I did like Bilbo, and I did like Frodo when I read Fellowship of the Ring, and I do like Link as a main character, who's not really a character, but it's just the player traveling through a cool realm. I didn't like Rand al'Thor. The character felt that, first of all, if we're talking about the show and the book at the same time, I think that the show's casting is pretty stellar, and I think that those actors are all great. And in the show, if I'm like, I don't like this, this character or this character is frustrating to me, it's not honestly because of the performance or really because of the writing, but it's more like what the story needs those characters to do. I'll give you an example. Matt is a really interesting character, but is also a really frustrating character because so much of this story is just like, it's like Hawkeye in the first Avengers movie, brainwashed by Loki. And it's frustrating because he is such a jerk, and the actor who plays him on the show does such a good job, but he is such a jerk. He's so unlikable. And Rand, to me, is a bit of a doormat and is really boring and is really, really just like such a safe, straightforward character. And I know that in this genre, it is difficult to really push the personality into really, because it all has to feel and sound like it is in this world. And sometimes it's difficult for me to connect to the emotions or the what's the word I'm thinking of? The priorities of these characters, where if I can't relate to like the stakes, at least a personality, or at least, if Rand's thing in this world is like, I just want to be home and I'm a reluctant hero. I've seen that and I've read that time and time again. So how is it going to be a little bit different? And in the book, different from the show, I think the book, the whole thing is like, I learned that my father's not my father. And it's pretty devastating. And it was interesting that was there, but I felt as though those kinds of things, really the character stuff, takes a backseat to the plot stuff.
It does.
And all of it takes a backseat to the lore stuff. And some people love that stuff. And I found myself being very frustrated because I was like, the pacing on this book is just very, very slow and takes its time. And they get to a new location or they meet a new character. And instead of that classic rule, show, don't tell, the character's like, hello, well, I'm going to tell you about this thing from hundreds of years ago, the queen and the
monologue.
king. And it's a monologue, and it's, and the show has found certain creative ways to avoid that and sidestep that, but it's still really adhering to the story. So like, Rand is a frustrating character in the show. I'm like, he is boring. And I'm watching this with my girlfriend and we're kind of agreeing for the most part. We're like on the same page. We're like, we like this character. We don't like this character in the show. And then I read the book and I'm kind of expecting to get more, but it's really kind of the same. Like the show is so brisk compared to the book, but I'm not going like, oh, they're missing a bunch of vital. I'm like, no, you guys are doing good. You really trimming that fat.
The book is like a very large pot of soup, and this large pot of soup has about 4 pieces of meat and 3 vegetables. And what the show did was just extract all the good stuff. And so you go, this is such a good meal. And then, of course, you read the book and you're just like,
this is a lot of broth.
Soup.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks, Lee. Good soup. Yeah.
So the show is good soup.
The show's good soup.
It's a little sort of worn out with the book. But I find it was very obvious when there were pages of dialogue because, you know, Rosman acting it out, it was the same character. And so you just are hearing the same voice for minutes at a time. So I would kind of drift a little bit being like, come on, where are the, like, I think it was Kate in the Geek Bomb Discord that said you could easily cut out 300 pages from this book and it wouldn't affect the story whatsoever. You would still have enough time to pace in a very like interesting way all the parts of this book. And then Kate says, if this book is a soup, it's a white person soup and it has no seasoning. And I read elsewhere where it was like, I think it was again in the Geek Bomb Discord, someone said it's like he wanted to learn from Tolkien, right? We got a high fantasy adventure. Here are the stakes. Let's go. Get our group together. And then took the worst part of Fellowship of the Ring, or like, you know, the Lord of the Rings, which was the long-winded travel with no point or purpose and the stretched out moments. It's like he almost, Robert Jordan went, that's good fantasy. And it's like, ugh. But I will find that like it was very much like this. There were dragging lows that, my God, especially when Rand and Matt were on the road together, that just felt very, very long. I'd hoped that it would cut between the 3 storylines a lot more than it had. And I think that's the next question that I had. When it's split up, D&D, one rule, never split the party. They split the party. But you've got Moraine, Lan, and Nynaeve as one group. You have Perrin and Egwene as another group. And then you have Matt and Rand. Because there's 3 separate storylines going kind of like coherently together, I would hope that there would be more chopping and changing between it to keep it interesting and to keep 3 coherent storylines happening at the same time. That was fun. And it wouldn't. It would kind of be like, bop, 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 whoosh, bop, bop, bop. But out of those 3 storylines that took place, which one were you most invested in? Which one did you like the most?
Well, it's interesting because in the show, I was not the most invested in. I was probably the most invested in whichever one Moraine was in. She was in one of the groups, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Moraine, Lan, Nynaeve.
Whenever that trio of characters were on screen, I was like, this is what I care about the most. But in the book, because
of the sexual tension between Nynaeve and Lan?
100%.
Yes.
100%.
Favorite part in the book, favorite part in the show.
Yes, that was really good in the book too, and in the show. But in the book, I think I was actually more invested in Perrin because lovely actor that plays him on the show, and in the show they give him a massive change to his story, which I'm going to now spoil in case you're watching this and haven't seen the show or haven't read the book. Dude accidentally kills his own wife.
Yes.
With a huge axe that then he like in the book is carrying around. And I'm trying to remember if he has it in the show or not, but like when he's fighting all the Trollocs, he accidentally kills his own wife. And I remember seeing some fans of the book talking about that change and being excited about it because they're giving him more because they felt that maybe he was lacking in the book. So for me, it was this really interesting combination of whenever he's really, like down and kind of mopey in the book, in my head, I'm like, it's because he killed his own wife, but we don't know that as the reader, just because I saw it in the show. But even if that's not the case, it just kind of helped that. And in the book, I was more invested in his and Egwene's story because they went and hung out with a wolf guy. And that's not in the show. The show has so far
Elias,
that I've seen hinted at his ability to like talk to, communicate, read minds, or be part of like wolf pack, powers, whatever it is, which is cool. But in the book, he straight up hangs out with like a dude who lives out in the woods who's like, I just hang out with wolves and they hang out with me and I'll teach you the ways of the world and I'll come with you. And these wolves will all be part of the same pack. So I was kind of into that. So yeah, and it was interesting too is when the show split the party, Maude, I was like, I bet you the show did that to just kind of get things moving, you know. No, the book did it, which is very interesting. And even when in the book, when they split these characters, it's really smart because it almost feels like it's a combination of characters that Robert Jordan almost is kind of going against. I don't think you would expect Perrin and Egwene to sort of pair up and then go off on a thing together. I don't think you would expect Nynaeve to show up with Moraine and Lan. I'm going to be so bad with these names, but it's there in the book, and I think that the book, like you're saying, Maude, frankly, when you said what you said earlier, cutting 300 pages, no. Honestly, I think there's a version of this book where you could cut each chapter literally in half, find a way to literally cut each chapter in half by page number. And whether that means we don't get more description of the next village that they're in or more summation of lore, we don't need it. Consolidate.
So in the show, they consolidated Camlin and Tarvalor.
Yes.
Tarvalor.
Yes.
They condensed that.
Yes.
So yeah, instead of doing like 17 pit stops at every tavern, at every road, at in every single town, we didn't necessarily require. I feel like you've seen one tavern, you've seen them all, kind of deal. But I really did like, and I think that maybe that was exhausting during the read as well, where we are learning quite quickly that Rand, Mat, Perrin, Egwene, and Nynaeve really were isolated their entire lives and have no understanding. And yet this dark power and dark friends who are worshipping this dark lord, they have this a quantified amount of information, and they're everywhere. And this is what I find really quite interesting when you're looking at sort of like a belief system where they are recruiting members, and they could be absolutely anyone or anywhere. And as we discover further down the line in the book, even in Tarvalon, the Aes Sedai, there is a secret sect of Black Aes Sedai who are obviously in hiding or like very covert, that are sort of like they've infiltrated sort of like the main Sedai. And I think when they've mentioned that, you then start going back to Moraine's actions, and you're like, I know she's trying to protect them from the one power, but is she tricking them all and taking them straight to that? Like, there was a lot of trust issues. And I think that especially in Mat and Rand's part, no matter where they went, they just couldn't catch a break. They could barely sleep. They couldn't rest. They were out of money. And it was like, no matter where they went, there was someone else looking for them and recognizing them. And I think that, there's a lot of parallels with that, but I thought that was well done. I liked that Mat and Perrin and Rand had their own sort of like unique part of this mysticism, when throughout the world building, it's been sort of told that the one power and the Aes Sedai is sort of like a woman only power. And that any man who tries to channel said power goes absolutely insane, and they need to get sort of like disconnected from it in a very brutal way. And they're learning that it's like this, in terms of magic, it is not a man's world. And the man is almost like the protector of the Aes Sedai, who is more powerful. And I love that dynamic, especially from a male author, especially given the time. But I also like that the trio of dudes had their own sort of point and purpose that fell inside this world building in a way of the magic use. But I kind of wanted to hear from you. Like, I obviously felt very empowered. I thought the show did a really good job. Perhaps the Red Aes Sedai are hitting sort of man-hating a little bit too much over their head, but that's literally their point in the Aes Sedai. But I love the fact that women have like a little bit more superiority when it comes to harnessing the magics in this world. What was that like for you?
I think that, and I don't know the team of writers on the show. I know that Rosamund Pike is one of the producers, so there's multiple producers on the show. I think that the book puts forth that idea, and it's such a great idea, but I feel like the book and Robert Jordan and this, at least in this first book, like almost doesn't go into it enough for me. I think that still to kind of rely on Rand essentially being the protagonist, the main character, and still kind of experiencing this world and the dynamic of men and women and the different magic systems that they have set up is still done through like, well, these young boys don't know about the world, do they? And they're going to learn, you know. So it's a little bit like, I don't know if in my mind that maybe a protagonist for this book should have been Egwene or another young woman or something. I don't know. I just feel like, I think that the show, at least this first season, is playing a little bit more with what that means and what it's saying about our world. And there's been a little controversy because in the show, Moraine has a relationship with another woman. And apparently the showrunner was like, so I got my first death threat. And the showrunner was like, but here's the thing, because I'm running this show, that means that now all their characters are gay. Perrin, Matt, they're all gay now.
Yeah.
Like just kind of jokingly putting that out there. But it's also like, yeah, I think that made Moraine much more of
it made absolute sense though.
Yeah, of course. A much more of a fully formed character in my mind than the very mysterious version of her that's in the book. And so to answer your question, Maude, like, you felt very empowered. It's such a great idea to say only women can access this power.
Well,
but
actually, to kind of be canonically accurate,
yes,
the one power is both sort of like masculine and feminine. There is the balance there. But it's found that when men access their half of it, it is chaos and destruction in a way.
Hey, that makes sense. Yeah.
What's it called? They both start with S. Oh, come on, the sardine and the sardani.
Definitely the sardines. It's the sardines.
The sardines. Good. Yeah, that sounds about right.
Packed real tight in that little can. I forgot I was going to ask you a question and I forgot what it was. Maybe because I'm drinking a whole bunch of wine right now. But yeah, it's a good dynamic that I like. I was going to say too, the other thing, and I know I mentioned this.
And Saidar. Sorry, I needed to get that right.
Thank you.
Oh, the yin and yang, says Shadow Owner. Thank you, Shadow Owner.
Yes. I know that I mentioned this in the Geek Bomb Discord mod, but the other thing that was tough for me was that I'm reading this book and I just in the past week like binge watched all of Avatar: The Last Airbender.
Yes.
And that series and that world, I love how they do world building in that story. And I think it's the gold standard. And I know that when we were, I think when I posted in your Geek Bomb Discord, somebody mentioned, yes, well, a lot of the times the first book in a fantasy series has to be this way because they're doing a lot of world building. And I remember feeling like I disagree, I guess. I feel like I prefer stories that don't get bogged down or don't feel like to me like they're getting bogged down by it, but find ways to give out that information when it pertains to what the character's going through. So I wanted to ask you about that. I mean, you are a big time fantasy fan.
Yes.
What kind of I guess I've just learned actually I don't like lore. I like characters.
Yeah, right.
Even though I get super nerdy about stuff like that I'm already into and I learn all about the lore of that stuff. But which kind, like what do you prefer? How do you prefer your world building, character development versus world building? What was more effective in this book?
Yes.
And how did you sort of like contend with that?
You have to keep in mind that all of our main group of protagonists are all kept in the dark, being so far away. And so they're all clueless. And when they split the party as well, they have to find out through reliable sources each about this world. With Nynaeve, it's through Moraine and Lan. With Egwene and Perrin, it's through this wolf elder, Elias. And it's also through the traveling group.
The people of the Leaf? Or
yes,
the Way of the Leaf people.
Way of the Leaf, yes. And then you have, which is a kind of like talking about how there is a lot of war, but they're trying to choose non-violence. But then Elias was talking all about sort of like this pack mentality and the powers that Perrin possesses. And then through Matt and Rand, it's every tavern owner and patrons, et cetera, et cetera. And Tom, when Tom Marilyn, the Gleeman was traveling with them. So he was almost like the counterpart to Moraine for a lot of this. And then Elias, who didn't make it into the show. But apparently he keeps coming back in some of the books and he's got a bigger role there. So who knows? The Tinkers, the Tuatha. That's it, Shadow. Oh, Shadow, you're good to have here. I appreciate that. Because you have 3 separate storylines of exploration and trying to get from A to B.
Mm-hmm.
And for the first half of it, it's Moraine carrying that, and then the split happens.
Mm-hmm.
It becomes a lot more passive. And I think what you're after is learn as you go,
Active.
not as you're immersed into the lands, not just walking through it. And I kind of get that because it is incredibly lore heavy and there wasn't enough balance. When I spoke into the Wheel of Time Discord, a big thing that I learned about was the first book is majority lore because the characters don't matter as much in that first one. And in fact, it's the rest of the books where once the lore is kind of done and the world building has been built, then they start really heavily getting into the characters, which is why in this book, they are all a little bit one-dimensional.
Yes.
Yeah. Like Nynaeve is just like, I don't want all this power. And then she's like, but you're hot. Egwene is, I have no idea what's going on with Rand, but wow, I love being free. And then you have Perrin, who's just like, I don't really like to talk all that much, but now I'm seeing things through the eyes of a wolf, which probably the most interesting out of all of them. Matt was like, I'm the comic relief, but now I'm really paranoid and angry because I've got a dagger that I've been hiding from everyone.
Yes, the one ring or the dagger that has been influencing him. Right.
My precious.
Yes.
Exactly. And then Rand, who is like, I know nothing.
Yeah. Okay, great. My dad's not my dad. He is my dad. I say he's my dad, then he's my dad. Okay, man. You got it.
Michelle's saying the first book is almost like an anthology rather than a novel. The lore stores are beautiful on their own, but it's kind of whiplash to have them stuffed into the plot. Yes. Over on Twitch, Lemon Eater says the Cimmerillion was really the big lore book, and I think that it was handled well. Separate reference for those who are into that.
Yep.
So kind of comparing it to Lord of the Rings as well.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, so what
character did everyone relate to? Thank you, Tim and Daisy, saying I summed up the characters really well. It's easy to sum them up because, like I said, there's one-dimensional, and I could literally define them in half a sentence each. Madeline Kay, what a fantastic observation. I loved the running gag of Rand and Perrin both thinking that the other was better at interacting with women. The amount of times where it was like, I wonder what Rand would do in this situation. He's so good with women. And then Rand's like, I don't know how to talk to this girl. I wonder what Perrin would do. He was always so confident. Yeah, that was great. I did like that part.
Dudes are dumb. Dudes are real dumb.
Hello to Matt Perrin, who's in here. The question that he's just answered that I'm asking everyone else is, which character did you relate to the most? Hector, you said you struggled with it probably a lot. Matt says, I want to be Perrin, but I know I'm a Matt. I would say I'm 70% Egwene, 10% Nynaeve, and 20% Matt. What would you be, Hector?
I think I am probably Perrin, but I want to.
You're quite quick, and you've got a good way with your words.
Yeah, so maybe Matt. Yeah, that's what it is. So see now. Yeah, that's true. But maybe I am Matt because like sometimes I get sucked into Twitter and it just sucks the soul out of me, and I'm on my phone too much and it like hurts my body and I feel sick. So I'm Matt. Instead of a dagger, it's just Twitter.
The more you're on it, the more it corrupts you.
Yep. I'll do that.
That's really great. Truscon says, you're very Mattish, Hector.
Oh, thank you very much. I appreciate
they're like
that.
Tom, the Gleeman. I think that's a great thing. Kate says, no, I'm like the dark one. The wheel doesn't have to keep turning. We can break the wheel. We can stop the cycle.
Now I remember the question I wanted to ask you because I've kind of paused on me drinking all of this wine, Maude. I have a question for you.
Yes.
Do you, when you read a fantasy novel, do you ask yourself the question, what is the purpose of this story?
No.
Okay.
Never.
Okay.
Sometimes I will think, what is the quest? What is the objective? What is the goal? Just because I need to know that they're going in a direction. It doesn't have to be super linear. It could be a squiggly line to get there. But I think all good writing is like, especially if it's sort of a fantasy book, it's what's the end goal.
Is there a
And for
plan?
this
What's
one,
the
it was
plan?
like, we just have to get to Camelin. We just have to get to Tarvalon. We just have to get to the Blight in the eye of the world and find the Green Man. And we're in the last third of the book and we're like, the who? We have just done 1,000 pages of lore, and now
Yep.
you're dropping in a crucial character that has not been mentioned or foreshadowed or anything yet.
Yep.
Like, I think that it could have been, and actually I've got a part in our script where it's like, what are some improvements that you would make? It would have been handy to have the traveling, what is it called again? The Tuatha?
The Tuatha?
Since they're the way of the leaf, to introduce the Green Man.
Yeah, here's the other thing too.
Ryan, you're 100% right. Ryan predicts that in this last episode, the Green Man will be cut.
Oh,
Elias didn't make it. I don't
show?
think the Green Man will at all. I could put money on that. Yeah.
I want to mention one of the last books we read, and then the adaptation for that. Remember when we read 3 Foundation books?
I was in a coma.
Yeah, it was tough.
Yeah.
But one of the most interesting characters, if not the most interesting character, and Matt Karen will back me up on this, is the Mule. And if you watch the Apple TV Plus show, the first episode name drops the Mule. This character's not in the season, spoiler, but like the fact that the show knows, hey, we know who one of the most interesting characters in this thing is. We're going to dangle that carrot. We're going to get to that, and the show could have set up the Green Man. And the thing that's frustrating about something like this, where it is a complete fantasy world, is, does it feel like the author or creator has it all mapped out? Because it's kind of cool when it does feel like that, or it's kind of cool when there can be little teases and it feels really organic and it's really woven in there. And then there's such great payoff. And here's the other thing too, reading this entire book, I just felt like, I bet you everything I'm reading is going to pay off 6 to 12 books from now. I just don't have that kind of commitment.
So I like that for you to make sense of analogies, you will always turn to sort of comic book heroes. For me, I will usually reference video games.
Yes.
And so not many people kind of understand it, but I find with storytelling, there will be sort of like a linear story. So a video game where you start off at your hometown and then the next quest takes you to the next town and then you have to complete everything in there. And then once you've done that, then you'll progress into the story. I find the Wheel of Time is like an Elder Scrolls game where they place you in the world and you can go in any single direction and it keeps expanding and it doesn't matter what order you do it. And it's just so sort of like vast.
Yeah.
And once you kind of like complete an area and then you keep going, the story will bring you back there because it's like, everything's been made available. And so they kind of bounce. And that's what I find Wheel of Time is like, where it's not a linear story. We have stumbled across so many places. We have access to so much lore. Shadar Lagoth has its own sort of unique sort of contained story there, which did kind of resurface. And one part of that is following Matt's story uniquely alone. But we're looking at this dark shadow and a curse. And then we go on to underneath the grounds where there's ways, where it's like secret traveling ways. And there's a wind, which is not the shadow, but it's a wind and it's similar. But instead of disintegrating, you go mad. But it's introducing so much of nearly the same stuff. Same, but slightly different.
Yeah.
And I think that that's exactly what we're going to be doing in these books. It's just bouncing around and unfolding all the different stuff that's been kind of like trickled in instead of complete thing moving along.
Until you're prepared enough, ready enough to go take on the final boss.
It's not a final boss. It's a stepping stone where it's like, cool, we did that one thing.
The Dark One's not the final boss?
That was just no.
Okay.
Like
the Dark One is not the Sauron of this story?
This was Shadow Ganon. If we can, you're wearing a Zelda shirt, so
yeah, good. This
is Shadow Ganon. It's not even the real Ganon.
Okay.
It's Shadow Ganon. They're playing tennis with the swords and a ball of light.
Hurry up! Stop fishing! Stop fishing, Link. It doesn't matter that you can fish. Let's go.
Yes.
I asked a question earlier, Maude. When you read fantasy, do you ask the question to yourself, what is the purpose of this story? And I found myself doing that only because I need to I need to feel like I have more of a grip on the material than maybe what I'm reading from the material at face value, because I'm not too familiar with high fantasy and because I don't know the behind the scenes of the author's intent. And I do love that stuff. And I find that stuff usually helps me appreciate and understand the material more. To know that George Lucas came up with Star Wars because, you know, he's a filmmaker who loved cool old stuff, but he was also commenting a little bit on the Vietnam War makes me appreciate Star Wars more. To know that Brad Bird made the film The Iron Giant as a response to the fact that he lost his sister to gun violence. And then the movie The Iron Giant is about the idea of, if a gun had a soul, would it want to be a gun? And it makes me love that more. So when I read this and I'm reading it at face value and I'm like, this is the story, these are the characters, these are the stakes, they're going through the world. I'm kind of like, but is there more to, what is the purpose of this? What's the point? What was Robert Jordan's intent, knowing that so much of it is a riff on Tolkien? So much of it's a riff on the Lord of the Rings. And then I kind of
Sauron.
A little bit, but I'm also like, but what does that mean? What is Robert Jordan trying to say about Lord of the Rings? Because again, Patrick Rothfuss's Name of the Wind, he's kind of commenting on other fantasy ideas, and because he's either saying, hey, I agree with that or I disagree with that, and here's why, and then he puts his spin on it. And in reading this, one of the things I learned from hardcore Wheel of Time fans is they're like, did you know there's hints in the series that this world is actually our world, like thousands and thousands of years in the future? And
like
when
Shadow
I heard,
Chronicles.
Yes, like Shadow Chronicles or Thundar the Barbarian or whatever. But I heard this and I was like, really? Then why wasn't that like, does that matter? Is it just a fun thing? Or is it trying to say something about our world? Does it matter to the story? Does it matter to the intent? Why wasn't it maybe telegraphed a little stronger? Like, why, Matt Caron is saying kind of like Dune. Absolutely.
You need the first comment to get that.
Gotcha. Which is Robert Jordan wanted to explore the idea of how someone would feel if they were suddenly told they were a messiah, kind of like Dune.
Well,
Excellent.
if I could break it down,
Please.
This is a trope that is pretty much the backbone of fantasy. It's the chosen one trope.
Yes.
You find out you are the chosen one, whether it's via a prophecy, whether it's usually it's backed in sort of like a religion or text or tome or, whatever the purpose of life. But you realize that you are fundamentally the thing that becomes the chosen one. We have it in Harry Potter. We have it in not really Frodo. He's not a chosen one. He was just selected, which means
not destined, but still, chosen by Gandalf to be the wielder of the ring, and so much of the weight of that world is on these little shoulders for the Lord of the Rings and the Hobbit. And it's true in Star Wars, and it's true in there's so many chosen one stories.
And that's why you also see the other trope, which is the wise elder character that is the sort of like takes on the master and apprentice role, where it's like, I'm telling you news that's going to absolutely blow your mind. The life you thought you had is not the life you're actually going to do. You have to walk the path of your destiny, and I'm going to teach you. Oh, I'm dead. That's usually how that one goes. And just as they're starting to understand the depth of what it means to be the chosen one. Yeah. They're, it's your Dumbledore. It's, Obi-Wan Kenobi.
And there's some great comments in the chat right now, Maude, where, and this is also true with Dune. I know that Dune has very clear, at least the first book that we read, not the series, but just Dune, the book has a lot of environmentalist perspective. It's very clear. It's very clear. But Matt Caron has told me stuff because he's a big Dune dude. He's a Dune boy. He was telling me like, oh, later, Frank Herbert does this, Frank Herbert does that. Again, with the chosen one trope, this is what he does with it, which is very interesting. And Game Wizard says the interesting thing, though, which is explored and expanded on in other books, is that Robert Jordan gives the chosen one trope with a twist. Rand is central, but needs the other characters, else he fails. And
that's
again,
what I like about the lore here, where it's like, yes, you're the chosen one, but fate is ever moving. And I love how Moraine is just like, this isn't what I planned for, but this is how it's just happened. So we have to accept that the wheel wheels what the wheel.
The wheel wheels what it wheels. I have thoughts on that.
Wheels.
I have thoughts. Yes, the wheel wheels what it wheels.
No.
Wheel's gonna wheel, however it wheels. However it's wheeling in the moment is how it wheels. It's how it really wheels. Share your wheelings.
The wheel weaves what the wheel wills. God, that needs to be a.
She sells seashells by the seashore.
That's easy.
Yeah.
The wheel weaves what the wheel wills.
The wheel weaves what the
wheel's
wheel
gonna
wheels.
wheel. Because the hate's gonna hate and the wheels are gonna wheel.
I feel like a Scottish person trying to say purple burglar alarm. It's impossible. I can't do it.
Purple burglar alarm.
In a Scottish accent, Maude.
Pal, regular.
Oh my God, no, not French, Scottish.
Burglar.
Purple burglar. I can't say it. I cannot say it. Purple burglar.
The wheel wheels.
But
as the wheel wheels. As
what I
thank you.
What I was going to say was about how Robert Jordan explores these ideas later. I'm kind of frustrated that it's like, well, why isn't that telegraphed a little more in this first book? Do you know what I mean? That's the thing where I go, what is the purpose of the story? This is so straightforward to me that I don't see the Matrix code, the purpose of the story, and it gets me not as excited. Whereas, you know, if you tell me a little bit of behind the scenes, if I understand what the politics are, what this writer's perspective is, I tend to relate to the material more, and I'm either on board with it or I'm like, actually, I disagree, but let's see where he goes. And the other thing is, the one thing that I am totally okay with whenever there's a story that's like, it's fate. That's why these things are lining up, is when they did the new Star Trek film with Chris Pine and Zachary Quinto. And as they were writing that film, and then later the movie came out, and Star Trek fans were always like, how can all these characters just happen to be in these places so that they can form the crew of the Enterprise by the end of it? And the writers are saying it's sort of the timeline correcting itself. It's fate. Kirk needs to be friends with Spock. It is fate. However, in this story, whenever Moraine brings that up and she's like, oh, because of the power of this fate choosing you and everything wrapping around, like surrounding you, and we're all kind of getting sucked into it, sometimes I would feel like, then what are the stakes? I don't know what the stakes are. I don't know if Rand really is in danger. Do you see what I'm saying? Like, because sometimes with fantasy and with the lore being dropped whenever there was a new challenge, I sometimes would also feel like, then what are the stakes? Because it could also just, sometimes it would feel like Robert Jordan would get you somewhere and then be like, did you know about this? And I'd be like, no, Robert. And did you know about this? Or are you just making it up right now? Because it's, you know, do you know what I mean? That it's so tricky to do. It's so tricky.
So you talk about sort of what are the stakes. Also, Swagger, it was fate with a T, not with a K. But the thing is, it's like, because it's the wheel of time. So we learn over and over because, you know, the dark friends and the dark followers and the dark lord is saying, I know everything and I've met every iteration of you. So if you fail in this life, I win again. And then you have to wait until you're reborn to do this all over again. And the last time was hundreds of years before that. So, or like decades before, however long the time is just but a construct. But that's what the stakes are. You have this life to get it right, because this is an ongoing, never-ending battle. And I think that's what it is. And so you're going up against something that is almighty, that knows everything, and is using that knowledge against you because you are ignorant of everything, because you've just not learnt it.
I like that.
The last, I guess, because we've got 4 minutes, the last sort of final thing that I want to say, we've been talking about it a little bit, ways that it could have improved, and we might go more into that in the after show, which I'll tell you more about. But the last thing I want to ask everyone for input, what was your favorite moment out of all the things that happened, what was the piece of lore? What was the surprise? What was the moment? What was the relationship? What was the one thing of this book that was your standout that you enjoyed the most? Did you have something?
That's a great question. You're asking me, Maude. What was your favorite moment of the book? I think I I liked in the beginning when the Trolloc attacked Rand and spoke, and then that's not in the show. And then I saw a Nerdist video with Dan Casey where he's like, this Trolloc's name is this. He's a fan favorite character, and he's not in the show. And we've been told that he could appear in the show, but he hasn't shown up yet. And all of a sudden, I became very invested in that talking Trolloc. So probably my favorite moment in the book. Narg, the talking Trolloc.
Narg. I think I've got different moments from in the book than I do in the show. I completely agree with, sorry to bring it back, zombie musing. Moraine wielding the one power the first time brought tears to my eyes. Same. When I watched that moment where she's protecting Emmons Field and she is casting and she's harnessing the one power, and I actually asked Rosamund Pike about that. What was it like for her harnessing that one power? But that battle, that fight, it was such a great visual representation of what the one power was and harnessing that energy. It's absolutely the same. Tears to my eyes. I think in the book, there were just a couple of surprises. I think one of the characters, I cannot believe the name is escaping me, but it's the woman at one of the first taverns that they went to who could predict the future. Who just started spurting out all of this stuff. And I remember this, I was like, this 3 sentences is foreshadowing up to what could be about 10 or 14 books. And I think that that's some of the most powerful, Min, thank you, Min Farshaw. So Min comes in and she's like, you know, I don't really know how to understand it. I'll get glimpses of things. By the way, Matt, you know, I see a picture of the dagger. I see the fact that, you know, your heritage, you know, she calls everything and then goes to Rand. By the way, the woman that you think you're going to be with, it's not going to be like that. And Rand can't stop thinking about that. But she puts so much into action from that. It doesn't make it into the TV series. But that for me, what Min says literally foreshadows the whole series, says King of Persia. So, cool. It's Moraine casting Fireball and calling lightning for sure, says David Nichols. That's my favorite part of the TV show. Favorite part of the book is Min's foreshadowing. But right now we are going to head over to the after show. We have decided our book for January. Hector, would you like to announce, because it did get updated.
Yes.
Would you like to announce what we're going to be reading next month?
Yes, it is a comic book and also an audiobook, and I'm probably going to do both. But I guess you could do either, and we'll see. We'll compare notes and see if it lines up. We are reading the first 3 volumes of Sandman by author Neil Gaiman, and I think a couple different comic book artists, if I'm not mistaken. So Sandman volumes 1 through 3, which is also what the new audiobook Sandman covers. And that also has like a really stellar cast, and you can get that on Audible. So do both, do either. I'm going to come at you with the comic book perspective, and I'm going to check out the audiobook because I've heard nothing but good things. And we'll see how everybody feels about some fantasy / horror / kind of Twilight Zone / superhero / metaphysical fiction that really, really put Neil Gaiman on the map. Sandman volumes 1, 2, and 3.
So chat is going off, loving that. Zusadai, really quickly, Zusadai, because your name is Zusadai as well, says that Min is actually in the show. No, the other Sadai, Zusadai earlier up said Min's in the show.
No
so I want to figure that one out.
No way, Jose. I guess I got to rewatch the show.
Right?
So that by the way,
that one.
That Sandman episode is going to be January 26th. January 26th, Wednesday, 5 p.m. Pacific Coast time. Put it in your calendars. Mark it in your calendars. You got plenty of time to read Sandman or listen to Sandman. You got the whole winter holiday break and all of January, and we'll see you then. Maude, where are we going right now?
Over to Geek Bomb. So Geek Bomb also does a book chat throughout the month. The book for January is going to be Project Hail Mary, which actually got the #1 spot for best book on Audible for 2021. But we also conduct the after show. So this was all about Hector and my opinion on the book. my opinion on the book. We talked, we referenced chat, but in this Discord group with Geek Bomb, it is a paid feature. So if you do sign up to any tier on patreon.com, you immediately get access to the hashtag reading section. We talk about the book chat book and Nerdist Book Club. We do the after show. We jump into a call. It's not recorded, and we have our own discussion, and it's very relaxed, and it means that everyone gets to kind of share their thoughts on the book as well. So anything that we didn't cover, which was ways that it could have improved, the differences between the TV show adaptation and the book, talking more about the one power. We haven't really discussed Loyal, so we can get into that in the after show. But sign up to the Patreon, join the Discord, you get access to the call. We'll see you in there in about 5 minutes, and it will be fantastic. So yeah, super excited to do that one. Thank you so much for joining us for this particular episode covering Wheel of Time for Nerdist Book Club. I'm Maude, and we'll see you next time. Jan 26 to be exact, talking Sandman.
Bye.
Na, na, na.